A haunting guitar melody pierced through the heavy silence that enveloped the house in the tranquil suburbs of Los Angeles. Jake halted abruptly on the staircase, his senses captivated by the peculiar and haunting melody that filled the air. The music was unlike anything he typically encountered, devoid of cheerfulness or rhythm. Instead, it bore a weight, fragmented, resembling a muted wail concealed within each note. His gaze instinctively flicked upward, drawn to the room from which the music emanated. Emily. The mere mention of the name ignited a restless energy within Jake. Her arrival yesterday infused the space with a vibrant energy, shattering the familiar cadence that had long defined this household. Jake found it impossible to forget the moment she stepped into his life. She emerged from the sleek, expensive car with an air of cool detachment, her gaze sharp and unapologetic. In his own home, Jake felt as though he had become a mere specter, unseen and unheard. She cast a brief, almost indifferent glance in his direction before turning away, as if he were unworthy of any further consideration. Yet, the melodies that flowed from Emily's fingertips appeared to transport him to a realm beyond his own. Jake ascended the stairs with care, each step taken with a measured lightness, as if the very sound of his movement might dissipate should he hurry. As he approached Emily's room, the melody intensified, resonating with a profound depth of feeling. As he approached her door, the music suddenly ceased. In that moment, the house seemed to be suspended in time, as if it were holding its breath. "Are you intending to remain there throughout the night?" Her voice sliced through the quiet, silky and tinged with irony. Jake recoiled slightly as the door burst open, revealing her standing there. Emily stood in the doorway, her piercing blue eyes shimmering beneath the gentle glow of her bedroom light. Her brown hair cascaded casually over her shoulders, and she donned an oversized band t-shirt that Jake couldn't place, the sort that seemed to enhance her effortless, wild aesthetic. Yet it was her gaze that genuinely disturbed him, frigid, piercing, and incisive, as if it possessed the power to cut straight through his very being. "I wasn't eavesdropping," Jake blurted, a flush creeping up his cheeks. "It is merely your guitar. It resonates, pleasant." Emily arched an eyebrow, her lips twisting into a smirk devoid of any warmth. "Pleasant? That doesn't quite sound like a glowing endorsement for my music." "Well, I appreciate it, I suppose." She tilted her head slightly, observing him as if he were a puzzle that held little intrigue for her to unravel. Then she inquired, "Jake, is it the reserved gentleman residing in this place?" Jake sealed his lips, the sharpness of her words piercing him, yet he opted for silence. He struggled with comebacks, particularly in the presence of someone like Emily, whose confidence seemed to cast a shadow that made others feel small. "Yeah, I'm Jake," he mumbled, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Emily folded her arms, resting against the doorframe. "Fascinating. I never imagined you would have an interest in music. You appear rather reserved." Her words struck him like a needle through his pride, yet Jake maintained his poise. "I'm merely inquisitive. Your music resonates, deeply moving." For a fleeting instant, a gentle warmth flickered in Emily's gaze. Yet, it vanished just as swiftly as it had come into being. "Touching, isn't it?" "Perhaps. Yet, I find that emotions are not something I readily divulge to just anyone." With that, she pivoted away from him, retreating into her room and closing the door firmly before Jake had the chance to utter another word. In the ensuing moments, the resonant strumming of her guitar enveloped the atmosphere once more, yet this time, the melody surged with greater intensity. It was nearly stormy. A tempest had been unleashed. Jake remained frozen in place, his thoughts swirling with uncertainty. What was it that made her appear so weighed down? How could an individual radiating such power produce melodies that resonated with such fragility? He ultimately withdrew to his chamber, yet the melody of Emily's guitar resonated in his thoughts long after he had shut the door. It felt like a soft murmur in the shadows, a fragment of a riddle he couldn't quite decipher. And although he would never confess it, Emily had stirred something within him, something he was not yet prepared to define. Could it have been curiosity? Or maybe, an essence that resonates with a profound yearning? Unbeknownst to Jake, Emily's guitar held a significance that transcended mere melodies. It was an introduction. A subtle foreboding of the intricate and perilous feelings poised to emerge, drawing them both into a tempest from which there would be no escape. On that restless night, sleep eluded Jake. Emily's guitar lingered in his thoughts, each note seemingly carved into the fabric of his memory. He reclined on his bed, gazing at the ceiling, his chest burdened by an unnameable restlessness. Jake found himself captivated by an elusive quality in Emily that he struggled to understand. It wasn't merely the manner in which she strode into the house, exuding a bold self-assurance, it was also the way her music echoed through the space. It was more than merely heavy. It was eerie. It bore a plea for assistance, concealed within every resonating note. As dawn broke, Jake descended to the kitchen, arriving earlier than his usual routine dictated. To his astonishment, Emily was already present, perched at the table with a coffee cup awaiting her attention. Silence enveloped her as she lightly tapped her fingers on the table, creating an unseen melody, her eyes locked onto the world beyond the window. For the first time, Jake perceived a distinct change in her essence. Her typical demeanor of indifference had vanished. Bathed in the gentle glow of dawn, her expression revealed a subtle melancholy that eluded his understanding. "Good morning." Jake's voice sliced through the stillness, offering a warm greeting. Emily glanced at him, her striking blue eyes fixing on his. "Morning," she replied, her voice hoarse and clipped, as though it bore the burden of a restless night. Jake settled into the seat opposite her, clutching his coffee cup tightly, as if it were a lifeline. The quiet that enveloped them was not one of animosity, rather, it was laden with the weight of unexpressed reflections. At last, he shattered the silence, his voice soft yet laced with intrigue. "The guitar you played last night. It was quite enjoyable." Emily released a laugh, though it was devoid of any true joy. "Is it satisfactory? I doubt you truly understand." Jake's brow furrowed ever so slightly. "Could you clarify what you mean?" Emily lifted her cup to her lips, savoring the warmth of the coffee as her eyes met his for a fleeting moment, only to wander off into the distance. "The melodies that resonate within me. It serves a purpose beyond mere enjoyment. It serves as my refuge. Yet, regardless of how deeply I immerse myself in play, the ever-present reality lingers, patiently awaiting my return." Jake found himself at a loss for words. He sensed the gravity of her words, the unfiltered truth that lay beneath them. Something simmered beneath her surface, a feeling trapped within, an essence she couldn't liberate herself from. Yet, just as he was about to inquire further, Emily placed her coffee down and reclined in her chair. "Have you ever experienced the sensation of being out of place, as if you don't truly fit in anywhere?" she inquired, her voice soft yet piercing, slicing through his musings with precision. Jake stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. The inquiry pierced through to his core, tugging at emotions he'd kept hidden from the world. "Indeed," he conceded in a hushed tone. "Constantly." Emily wore a smirk, though it held no trace of mockery. It felt weary, as if she had accepted a reality they both recognized. "At the very least, we share that connection." She rose from her seat, carrying her empty coffee cup toward the sink. Jake observed her graceful movements, her self-assured demeanor concealing a solitude that resonated within him, though he struggled to grasp its full depth. For a fleeting instant, he paused, caught in a web of uncertainty about whether to voice his thoughts. Yet he found himself unable to restrain his impulses. "What brings about those feelings?" he inquired. Emily halted abruptly, her fingers gripping the cup tightly. She remained turned away from him, yet her voice sliced through the silence, sharp and laced with bitterness. "This location, this dwelling, this existence. Everything is a carefully orchestrated arrangement. My mother did not wed your father out of love. She chose to marry him, seeking the stability he offered, a partner capable of bearing the burdens she found too heavy to shoulder alone. What about me? I am merely the burden she chose to carry. Jake sensed a constriction in his throat. He had not anticipated her candidness, the way she peeled back the courteous veneer of their merged family with such unflinching truth. Her words broke apart the meticulously crafted facade of harmony that his father had labored to establish. Emily turned back to him, and for the first time, her piercing gaze softened into something empty, something fragile. Have you ever sensed that you are merely a pawn in another's strategy? She inquired, her voice now softened. Jake remained silent. There was no necessity for him to do so. Emily gave a subtle nod, conveying her understanding, before she exited the kitchen, leaving Jake to grapple with a tempest of emotions swirling within him. Once she departed, Jake gazed out the window, watching as the morning sunlight poured over the backyard. A question lingered in his chest. Who was Emily, in truth? Why did he feel an undeniable urge to comprehend her, as if uncovering her truth was an inevitability he could not escape? Jake was unaware at that moment, yet this marked merely the inception of a bond that neither of them could have anticipated. That afternoon, the house felt hauntingly vacant. Jake lounged on the sofa in the living room, his gaze glued to the flickering screen, yet his mind wandered far beyond the confines of the room. With his father and stepmother out for dinner, the house was left in the quiet company of just him and Emily. Jake had grown accustomed to evenings such as these, his father perpetually occupied, while his stepmother seldom remained in one place. Yet, Emily's presence transformed the atmosphere, infused with a palpable tension that Jake found elusive and difficult to define. He listened as her footsteps descended the stairs, slow and deliberate, as though she were thoughtfully considering each step. Jake remained facing away, yet he sensed her presence as she stepped into the living room. As she settled into the chair across from him, his gaze instinctively drifted in her direction. Her chestnut locks cascaded gently over her shoulders, her legs elegantly crossed, and in her hand, she held a glass of deep red wine. Emily appeared to inhabit a realm that felt utterly foreign to him, a place both distant and unattainable. Is this how you always watch TV? It seems utterly tedious, she remarked, her voice playful, yet laced with an enigmatic hint that Jake found difficult to decipher. Jake offered a casual shrug, attempting to mask his true feelings with an air of indifference. Merely passing the hours. Emily wore a smirk, yet the smile failed to illuminate her eyes. She lifted her glass, savoring the wine, her eyes darting to the television before resting on Jake. Wasting moments. How utterly captivating. Is there truly nothing more worthwhile for you to engage in? Jake sensed the sharpness in her words, yet he chose to remain silent instead of responding. He was reluctant to acknowledge the turmoil that had stirred within him since Emily's arrival, yet her amusement at his silence only fueled her determination. Is this how you always are? She inquired, tilting her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as though she were scrutinizing him closely. Perpetually concealing oneself from the world. Jake's brow furrowed as he turned to confront her. What about you? Do you constantly seek to stir others up? Emily chuckled, her laughter ringing with sincerity this time. She placed her glass of wine on the coffee table, reclining in her chair with her arms crossed. Perhaps. Yet, I find solace in the fact that I am not feigning anything different. A hush enveloped the two of them. Not a comfortable silence, but one thick with tension, akin to a string pulled taut and poised to snap. Jake attempted to concentrate on the television, yet Emily's stare pierced through him, devouring all that lay in its wake. He reached his breaking point. What is it that you truly desire? Jake inquired, his tone calm yet unwavering. Emily inclined her body just a touch, her eyes shimmering with an enigmatic allure. I desire nothing. I find myself in a state of intrigued by your essence. Is it me? Jake let out a soft scoff. What could possibly captivate anyone about my existence? Emily hesitated before replying. Her eyes met his, unraveling the defenses he had meticulously constructed over the years to shield his true self. Perhaps it's due to your constant retreat. Your presence ignites a curiosity within me to uncover the depths of your true self. Jake sensed a constriction in his chest. He had never experienced anyone gazing at him in such a manner, so openly, so fervently. Uncertain of how to reply, he found himself at a loss. Yet, before he could gather his thoughts, Emily rose from her seat, clutching her wine glass with purpose. "Don't worry," she said, her voice gentle but laced with a hint of defiance. "I don't anticipate a response from you." She exited the living room, leaving Jake behind, engulfed in a haze of confusion and overwhelm. He found himself at a loss, yet a fragment of his being refused to allow her to slip away in such a manner. He rose almost as if compelled, trailing her into the backyard. She stood beneath the soft illumination of the patio light, a wine glass cradled in her hand, her eyes locked onto the vast expanse of the night sky. Jake halted a short distance away, hesitant to advance yet resolute in his decision not to back away. "What prompted you to come out here after me?" she inquired, her tone subdued, imbued with a gentleness that took him by surprise. Jake paused, the words lodged uncomfortably in his throat. "I'm uncertain." Emily pivoted to confront him, her cerulean gaze glistening in the dim illumination. "Are you unaware? How peculiar. I believed you had a clear vision of your desires." Jake emitted a faint, humorless chuckle. "What about you? Are you ever certain of your desires?" Emily advanced, and Jake sensed her aura, potent and nearly suffocating, enveloping him in a way that rendered him motionless. "Perhaps I do. Perhaps I am merely attempting to unravel it all." Jake remained silent. They remained in place, their gazes intertwined in a moment that seemed profoundly meaningful. Uncertain of who initiated the moment, he found himself captivated as Emily drew near, her breath brushing softly against his skin. Then she spoke, her voice a mere breath against the silence. "Have you ever considered that certain actions, despite their flaws, might still hold value in the pursuit of experience?" Jake remained silent. He was unable to. Before he could fully grasp the unfolding moment, Emily leaned in, her lips grazing his in a kiss so delicate, so ephemeral, yet it sparked something profound within him that he could not ignore. The kiss was brief, yet it lingered in the air. Yet, it proved sufficient to alter the course of everything. As Emily withdrew, her eyes shimmered with a feeling that eluded Jake's understanding. "Perhaps it is sadness, or something far more intricate. We both know this is a mistake," she said softly, her gaze fixed on his. "Yet, who truly cares?" She pivoted and strode away, leaving Jake rooted in place, his heart racing and his mind swirling in disarray. He was certain, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that this moment would linger in his mind for eternity, and that, whether he welcomed it or not, this was merely the start. Jake sensed a change in the air. From that instant in the garden when Emily pressed her lips against his, the world seemed to have been flipped on its head. Whenever their gazes intertwined, time appeared to stand still, and the recollection of that kiss lingered between them like a weighty, unvoiced truth, permeating the very fabric of the home. Yet, the tension extended beyond the boundaries of just Jake and Emily. Ryan, the closest companion of Jake, had started to sense that something was amiss. Ryan was a candid individual, and in recent weeks, he found it increasingly difficult to overlook Jake's peculiar conduct. Jake, inherently reticent, appeared to make a concerted effort to steer clear of Ryan's gaze each time Emily graced the room with her presence. And what of Emily? She maintained her characteristic demeanor, exuding confidence and an air of nonchalance. Yet, Ryan started to perceive the delicate manner in which she stole glances at Jake, believing herself to be unseen. On a Friday night, the answers arrived. Jake, Ryan, Emily, and a handful of friends congregated at a bar close to campus, seeking solace and relaxation after a demanding week. The atmosphere thrummed with vitality, where laughter and melodies intertwined to create an exuberant symphony. Yet Jake found himself unable to concentrate. He was overwhelmed by the weight of Emily's presence at the far end of the table. She donned a modest black dress that, in its unadorned elegance, rendered her irresistibly enchanting. With each burst of her laughter, Jake found himself irresistibly drawn to her, fully aware that those fleeting glances might spell trouble ahead. Ryan, positioned beside Jake, appeared to sense it. As Emily rose to fetch another drink, Ryan leaned in closer to Jake, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "What's the situation between you and her?" he inquired, a hint of jest in his voice, yet his eyes revealed a deeper discomfort. Jake shrugged, attempting to divert attention. Silence reigns. She is merely difficult to comprehend. Ryan's brow furrowed, a clear sign of his skepticism. "You know, I once believed I had feelings for her," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yet, at this moment, uncertainty clouds my thoughts. She is distinct. Do you not agree?" Jake remained silent, and that quietude only deepened Ryan's growing suspicions. As the hours slipped by and the group started to disperse, Ryan resolved to take action. As Jake rose to depart, Ryan trailed behind him, keeping a measured distance. He observed as Jake quietly made his way outside into the dimly lit alley behind the bar, and to his surprise, Emily emerged just moments later. Ryan stood still, his heart racing wildly. He edged nearer, mindful of remaining concealed in the darkness, yet near enough to observe. And then he beheld it. Under the soft illumination of the streetlights, Emily and Jake confronted one another. Ryan was oblivious to their murmurs, yet he felt no need to listen. He observed how Emily edged nearer, noted how Jake remained unflinching. In that moment, with a clarity that left no room for doubt, Emily leaned in and pressed her lips against his. Not a mere, fleeting kiss, but a profound connection, brimming with emotion, breaking every boundary they had vowed not to breach. Ryan was in disbelief at the sight before him. He spun on his heel, breath coming in ragged gasps. His closest companion, Jake, the one he held in the highest regard, had not only turned against his family but had also snatched away the girl Ryan had secretly wished to call his own. Ryan found himself adrift in a tempest of emotions, unsure of how to navigate the chaos within. The following day, Ryan faced Jake. They lingered in the deserted basketball court post-class, shielded from curious gazes. Ryan folded his arms, his face etched with a mix of fury and disillusionment. Jake understood the unspoken truth behind this moment. It was evident in Ryan's expression. "Did you really think I was unaware?" Ryan spoke, his voice laced with a simmering intensity that hinted at barely contained rage. "I noticed you were with Emily last night." Jake stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. He parted his lips, yet silence enveloped him, leaving no words to escape. "What on earth is going through your mind, Jake?" Ryan pressed on, his voice growing louder. "She is your stepsister, a part of your family, and you. Did you share a kiss with her? What prompted you to take this action?" Jake sensed the walls closing in around him. "Ryan, it's not as straightforward as you believe," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not straightforward?" Ryan emitted a harsh, mirthless chuckle. "Please elucidate it for me. How does an occurrence such as this come to be? Have you given any thought to your father? Could you share some details about your family? Do you really believe I'm unaware of all that?" Jake's voice cracked as he shouted, a raw display of emotion surfacing for the first time. "I understand, Ryan. I am aware that this is incorrect. I understand the depths of the struggle. Yet, I find myself unable to break free. I find myself unable to cease, Ryan." Ryan remained still for a moment, his fury gradually yielding to a more profound emotion. "Disillusionment." "Jake," he murmured, his voice heavy with tension. This matter extends beyond just you and Emily. This will bring devastation to your family. Should you persist, I cannot guarantee that this will remain my secret. Jake remained rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on Ryan as he turned and departed, leaving behind the heavy burden of his words that pressed down on him. Jake understood that Ryan had a point. Yet, the one truth he remained oblivious to was the art of releasing Emily, for each encounter left him gasping, as if life itself depended on her presence. The house had never seemed so frigid. The walls, once vibrant with the hum of daily family chatter, now resonated solely with the relentless ticking of the clock in a silence that weighed heavily in the air. Jake perched on the edge of his bed, his hands balled into fists, knuckles paling under the pressure. The encounter with Ryan from the previous day echoed relentlessly in his thoughts, reminiscent of a shattered vinyl trapped on its most agonizing melody. He understood that everything was hurtling toward an unavoidable end. Yet, what might that conclusion entail? Emily, the singular force that ignited his very essence, was simultaneously the architect of his deepest anguish. Ryan, his closest companion, now regarded him with a gaze heavy with disappointment and a sense of betrayal. And above all loomed his father, the figure who had perpetually anticipated Jake to excel, to adhere to the path of righteousness. It felt as though the burden of countless expectations and the chaos he had wrought were pressing down on him, suffocating him and rendering him breathless. A gentle rap disrupted the tranquility. Jake's gaze lifted, and time seemed to freeze as he beheld Emily framed in the doorway. She donned a relaxed sweater and jeans, her unpretentious outfit only enhancing the allure that captivated his gaze. For the first time, her piercing blue eyes seemed to lose their customary sharpness and defiance. Instead, they carried a profound sorrow, one that seemed capable of engulfing him entirely. "We need to talk," Emily said, her voice soft yet resolute. With a nod from Jake, Emily entered the room, gently shutting the door behind her. She perched beside him on the bed, her hands intertwined as though seeking to anchor her wavering resolve. A prolonged silence lingered in the air, dense with unvoiced realities. At last, Emily shattered it. "I know things are slipping out of control," she said, her gaze cast downward. "And I am aware. This cannot continue." Jake experienced a sudden, piercing ache in his chest. "Emily, the thought of losing you is unbearable." Emily faced him, her eyes glistening with the threat of tears. "Do you really believe that I desire that? Do you really believe I would willingly release the one thing that has brought me a sense of companionship?" Jake grasped her hands gently, his gaze filled with desperation. "In that case, refrain from doing so. A path will reveal itself to us. We will find a way to hold on to everything, to hold on to you, to hold on to the family." Emily gently shook her head, a bittersweet smile dancing on her lips. "Jake, this transcends our individual concerns. It revolves around your father, my mother, and the very foundation upon which this family stands. If they discover the truth, do you genuinely believe they will ever perceive us in the same light once more?" Jake remained silent. He was unable to. For he possessed the knowledge, yet confessing it felt akin to plunging a dagger into his own heart. Emily delicately extricated her hands from his grasp, rising to her feet and gliding toward the window. She gazed into the obsidian expanse above, where distant stars twinkled like the last breaths of fading flames. "I've pondered this endlessly," Emily confessed, her voice trembling. "I have contemplated every possible avenue through which we might find a way to make this endeavor successful. Yet, as I ponder further, it becomes increasingly clear that we are unable to do so. Not at this moment." Jake rose and approached her, drawing near enough to sense her aura yet refraining from making contact. "Emily, your departure would leave me utterly lost. Your absence is unbearable to me." Emily faced him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Indeed, you can, Jake. You possess a strength that surpasses your own perception. And one day, when the weight of it all has lifted, when we no longer feel like a burden to one another, perhaps, in due time, our paths will cross once more. Jake shook his head, his voice trembling. I wish to avoid the burden of waiting. I desire you at this very moment. Here it is. Alongside me. Emily smiled, a bittersweet yet affectionate smile, and lifted her hand to softly rest it on his cheek. Her touch radiated warmth and comfort, yet it carried the weight of farewell. Jake, at times, to truly love someone is to set them free. Not out of desire, but as the sole means to prevent the two of you from unraveling. Jake gazed at her, his eyes brimming with a sense of urgency. Yet, he remained silent, for within him, he recognized the truth of her words. The following day, Emily departed. Her mother conveyed her desire to return to New York, to pursue her studies and carve out her own path. The family remained largely silent on the matter, choosing not to delve deeper into the subject. Yet, Jake was aware of the reality. She believed this was the only way to shield them both from utter devastation. He lingered by his bedroom window, observing the car as it glided out of the driveway. Emily walked away without a glance, while Jake remained still, his hand by his side, unraised. Yet he sensed a fracture deep within himself. Something essential was eluding him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it might be lost forever. Weeks morphed into months. Life slowly returned to its familiar cadence, or so it seemed. Yet, each time Jake walked by the balcony where Emily's guitar had first graced his ears, he lingered for a heartbeat, as though anticipating the echo of a memory to resurface. Perhaps Emily was indeed correct. Perhaps, in a time when life was less complicated, they would rediscover their path to one another. Yet at this moment, Jake was left with only the singular action he was familiar with. Continue to press on, despite the burden of memories that lingered with each stride. And in the depths of his being, Jake understood that Emily, no matter her location, held a fragment of him close to her heart. For all eternity.